This is a simplified diagram for the genetic code for constructing proteins. There are more than 100,000 proteins that are constructed by the cells. Over 2,000 of those are enzymes. Enzymes are things that make reactions take place faster. But the genetic code is found in the DNA, which is in the helix form. It's two chains wrapped around each other. The DNA helix contains genes. It used to be thought that one gene makes one protein. Now we know that's a very simplified scenario, because there are lots of other ways of making protein, and it's a lot more complex than what the simplified version shows. DNA chain, there are 6 billion what are called bases. This A, C, G, and T are bases, and there's only 4 of them, just like in baseball. It's real easy to remember, just 4 bases. But anyway, this chain of DNA, if it were stretched out, it would be about 6 feet long. And in that 6 feet, there would be more than 10 trillion different traits. Proteins are manufactured according to the plans that are included in the DNA. So these are some examples of what proteins might look like. They're very complex structures. And as I pointed out, many of the proteins are called enzymes. Enzymes are absolutely critical for life. They contain slots that hold other reacting chemicals together to allow the reactions to take place. Without an enzyme, you would not have life. The slowest chemical reaction in life, without an enzyme, it would take 1 trillion years. With an enzyme, it takes place in less than 1/100 of a second, which makes it usable by life. Why do we talk about life as a computer system? Does life have computers in it? And it might be worthwhile to look at your idea of what a computer might be, because we think of a computer as something like this. And that's a picture of the first computer that was conceived back in 1837, 100 years before the electronic computer was even thought of. Purely mechanical. And yet it had all the characteristics of a real computer that we can see today. Richard Dawkins has said, the machine code of the genes is uncannily computer-like. Apart from differences in jargon, the pages of a molecular biology journal might be interchanged with those of a computer engineering journal. And that's amazing, except for one thing I would disagree with, and that's the term computer-like. They're not just computer-like, they're computers. And we'll talk about that. The information content of a simple cell has been established as around 10 to the 12th bits, that's 1 trillion bits, comparable to about 100 million pages of the Encyclopedia Britannica. If you looked at last year when Craig Vender's group developed the artificial genome, they manufactured by synthetic processes using life, and it wasn't out of non-living material, but they artificially generated a genome of a bacterium. And they injected it into another bacterium that was a different species after removing its DNA. And when they did that and booted the thing up, it manufactured all of the material for the bacterium that they injected into the nucleus. And what that proved was that life is basically the result of an information process, a software process. Our genetic code is our software, and this was experimentally verified by Ventnor's group. One of the most inexplicable parts of information are the algorithmic prescriptive information in life. An algorithm is a step-by-step process for solving a problem. For example, the proteins are generated by a step-by-step process for generating a protein, and that's encoded in the DNA. And it's interesting that the chance random processes, and law means it has to be this way, they cannot explain decision nodes. Decision nodes of a computer program can only be explained by what's called choice contingency. There has to be something that says this has to be this way rather than that way. So in the binary computer, for example, you have in each bit position 2 choices. Either it can be 0 or 1. What makes it that way? Well, choice contingency sets each bit to be a particular value in order for the program to function. If some bits are changed, you'll have a non-functional program. And that's the way it is in life also. But it's important to realize that prescriptive information is fundamentally, at its core, formal. It's not physical. It's stored in a physical medium, just like in your computer programs are stored in the physical bits of RAM in your computer. But what makes them prescriptive is the formal problem solving that went into setting each bit the way it is set. That's what is formal. It's non-physical. Information can be stored in any number of physical media, but information itself is non-physical. The information itself is purely formal. What makes it even more complicated is that a particular nucleotide can be part of multiple prescriptions. For example, one of the most common one, and humans have many of them, are overlapping genes. Overlapping genes take triplets of nucleotides that are used to create a particular sequence of proteins, amino acids and proteins, and it overlaps them. Have you ever tried to make meaningful sentences where, depending on where you start in that sentence, you would get meaningful words being created? That's what life does. And it goes beyond that even, where it takes the same nucleotide can be part of multiple prescriptions. Literally thousands of different prescriptions are possible by putting together things outside of the gene in what is called the epigenome, but we won't get into that. But basically what I'm saying here is that every nucleotide has to be set for a very particular combination of interpretations. And that is very difficult to explain from naturalistic scenarios. Because how do you get, it's like a crossword puzzle only has to worry about some of the letters are in 2 rows and columns. Well, if you had multi-dimensional crossword puzzle, that's kind of what we're talking about here, that it does that in life. There is no rational scientific basis for blindly believing in a relentless uphill push by mere physicality toward formal algorithmic optimization. There is no natural cause of functional algorithms. From computer science, I've seen some computer science programs that look like they were randomly put together, but they're not functional. So anyway, if you want to get rich, all you have to do is submit a proposal here, because the Origin of Life Prize, which has been around for over 10 years now, will be awarded for proposing a highly plausible natural process mechanism for the spontaneous rise of genetic instructions in life, sufficient to give rise to life. And that's never been even close to being a winner of that. So neo-Darwinian biology then says that each successive change in the gradual evolutionary process was simple enough relative to its predecessor to have arisen by chance. And it is also significant that Darwin said if it could be demonstrated that any complex organ existed which could not possibly have been formed by numerous slight modifications, my theory would absolutely break down. Okay? Let's take a look at the bacterial flagellum. This is an example used by Behe and others as a case of irreducibly complex systems. It is an electric motor that spins at around 100,000 RPMs with near perfect efficiency. It's driven by protons that are flowing through the stator to drive the thing. And there are more than 4 dozen proteins that are used to make this electric motor and propeller assembly. 30 of them are unique to the flagellum. So you'll hear things, well, there's the type 3 secretory systems that share some of the proteins. Well, yeah, they do. They share about 10 of them. But that leaves still more than 30 that are unique to the flagellum. And so if you just take those 30 unique ones and do some calculations, the probability of forming those is 1 part in 10 to the 5,250th power, right off the bat. So, what needs to happen then for science to be believable with information science, science needs to provide for some plausible mechanism to explain a number of different things from information science. How did nature write the prescriptive programs needed to organize life's metabolism? Those are programs, computer programs. How did nature write those programs? That needs an answer before you say, well, nature did it. Well, how? How did nature formally solve life's complex problems and write the programs? How did nature develop operating systems and programming languages in which to implement those programs? How did nature develop the arbitrary protocols for communication and coordination among the thousands or millions of computers in each cell? They all communicate digitally with one another, and they coordinate. How did nature do that? How did nature develop alternative generation of prescriptive messages using techniques such as overlapping genes, messages within messages? You have decoded messages, and within one set of decoded messages, once you decode it, inside of that decoded message is another decoded message, another coded message. How did nature do that? People have a hard enough time doing that. Encryption people have a hard enough time doing that. How did nature develop multi-level encryption and the consolidation of dispersed messages? Some of the messages that are combined to form proteins, those messages come from sometimes 1 million nucleotide separation between them. How did nature do that? These are science questions that need answers. How did nature defy the computer science principles by avoiding software engineering's top-down approach required for complex programming systems? Anybody who's done any programming knows that in order to get a functional program of any complexity, you have to follow a top-down design and implementation, or you're going to get garbage. How did nature do it? Bottom up, by randomly mutating at the bottom to produce something very functional at the top. That's a computer science mystery, if that could happen. How did nature produce complex functional programs without planning by randomly modifying existing algorithms? That's what mutation is. You have an existing algorithm that produces a protein, you randomly modify it. Why and how did that produce a new functional program that sometimes is better than the program that was modified? How did nature simultaneously modify multiple such programs in order to result in the production of irreducibly complex systems, structures?